And welcome inside of this week's edition of What's Important Now. I'm Tom Sears. Thanks for being a part of our program. And ladies and gentlemen, as you are well aware, we are just days away from the midterm elections. A lot happening around the world and around the country. And again, midterm elections on Tuesday. And we'll see, in part, if America is pleased with the direction of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the thing. We need to decide what we want. We need to decide what really, really matters. I have things I just don't give on. I've talked about it publicly before. I'll talk about it again. It's who I am. It's what I believe. My belief systems are, they're molded, they're made by a biblical worldview. And that matters to me. To me, that matters. And so, I don't give on issues like abortion. I believe that every life has the opportunity, or let me say it this way. I believe that every life should have the opportunity to live. And that it's not a woman's choice. I mean, it is, but it's not her right to take that baby's life. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Welcome inside the program. Again, days away. We have a lot to talk about today, a lot we're going to go over. And as we look ahead, there's going to be, I think President Trump's agenda is going to be put before the voters. And we already see some of that. But before we dive into all of that, let's give you some important information. If you'd like to email us, what'simportantnowradio@gmail.com, what'simportantnowradio@gmail.com. And if you'd like to send a letter, note, anything by mail, it's 8901 Good Hope Pike, Lost Creek, West Virginia, 26385. Again, that mailing address, 8901 Good Hope Pike, Lost Creek, West Virginia, 26385. Okay. So elections coming up. The battle specifically in the state of West Virginia is not as, it's not that much different than what's happening all across the country. In West Virginia, you have Senator Joe Manchin, who is being challenged, and he's being challenged by Patrick Morrisey, who they recently had a debate. And if I could just be honest with you, I'd like to kind of talk about that for a minute before we dive into some of the other things I want to get to today, including church safety and church security, which clearly is an issue. It continues to be an issue, especially if we look at what just happened, the tragedy at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. So, again, we have several things we want to look at. Oh, and by the way, don't want to forget this. So, What's Important Now has been airing. We're going into our 16th year, but it's not the only thing we do. We recently started a program called Pastor Talk, for those of you that may or may not be interested. And, you can find it on iTunes, for sure. You can also go to Spreaker.com and search that, Pastor Talk, with Tom Sears, and just some really good discussions about things in church and things that affect pastors and Christians all together. So we cover a lot of things. Currently, our newest program was Matters of the Heart. And just, a lot of times we in the church, we look at all the big things out that we can see, and we forget that it's the issues of our heart that are actually destroying us, potentially. And so we like that. It's called Pastor Talk. You can find us on iTunes. Go to Spreaker.com. You can find all of our programming, What's Important Now, and Pastor Talk. We encourage you to tune in and listen to that. Let's take a look at the Joe Manchin, Patrick Morrisey debate. And I want to give you, I try to be honest. I try to live honestly. And so I just want to tell you what I think. I want to tell you how it made me feel and just the takeaway from it. This is coming from someone that, again, tries to be honest. Okay. Number one, when you look at the facts, Senator Manchin he voted to fund Planned Parenthood. And ladies and gentlemen, that's a deal breaker for me. I think Senator Manchin's a nice guy. I do. I think that Senator Manchin sounds like West Virginia. I think he looks like West Virginia, and I think that's a good thing. But with that being said, I am 100% opposed to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood claims to be about women's health, and that is a total fabrication if I have ever seen one. And the fact that he voted to fund Planned Parenthood breaks the deal for me. But as and I've said this, privately, I don't know if I've said it publicly, I'm not a big fan of Patrick Morrissey either. And to be honest with you, after watching the debate, I am less of a fan. Now, again, I know some of you are like, what? I can't believe that he's saying this. And, because, again, I know President Trump stumped for him. I know that President Trump supports him. And I'm just not I don't need anyone to tell me how to think. No matter where I stand, I don't need anyone to tell me how to think. Okay, so yes, I'm a little distracted. My mind is in multiple different places because I'm trying to really articulate this. He had a bunch of, and I'm referencing Patrick Morrissey from the recent debate. He had a ton of talking points that he used over and over and over and over again. And he was, I think, trying to set himself up as a tough talker, as is President Trump. Now, what I'm about to say, some are going to agree with or disagree with. I think the difference between Donald Trump and Patrick Morrissey is Donald Trump is actually that guy. He's not putting on an act. He's not putting on a show. There were several things. Body language, nonverbal communication, they really, really stand out to me. Patrick Morrissey would not look at Joe Manchin. You go back, you watch that. It's on YouTube. You can find it on, I think, PBS, C-SPAN. He would not look at Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, on the other hand, was talking and he was, looking and he was trying to have, from what I could take away from it, a civil conversation. And he did not call him a liar or anything like that. The insults were coming pretty steady from Patrick Morrissey. And so body language, dodging questions, not being completely forthcoming, several different things were pointed out, and he refused to directly answer them. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think and again, I think he's trying to sort of catch the image of President Trump. President Trump is a tough talker. President Trump says what he thinks, and he runs with it, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And I think that's why he ends up in a lot of trouble sometimes, is because he doesn't think things through. Patrick Morrissey, to me, came off as very scripted, it was well planned, but it was not authentic. It was not real. And that's not going to be popular for a lot of people that like authenticity. And I was completely and totally turned off. Completely. Again, Senator Manchin was far more endearing. But as I said coming into this program, it really does come down to the issues. And to stand with Planned Parenthood, for me, is a deal breaker. And so that's where I'm at. I don't know. I just can't do it. Planned Parenthood is making millions off the murder of innocent babies. That's a fact. And I just feel like in this country, we kind of need to figure out where we stand. We're so divided. So anyway, there's a report out by OneNewsNow.com. Abortion giant uses pro-lifers' money to fight them. A new report suggests that taxpayer funds that flow to abortion champion Planned Parenthood frees up money to fight pro-life candidates. And it's important for taxpayers. It's important for taxpayers to understand that they are funding Planned Parenthood at the tune of $500 million, and Planned Parenthood uses those funds for their very nominal health services and is now freeing up other donations that they receive through private donations or corporate donations. This is according to Allison Centofonte of Live Action, the organization that's behind the new report on Planned Parenthood. She says that those donations are actually going to their political arm. So to put it another way, Live Action says that Planned Parenthood is weaponizing taxpayers' money against them. Think about that. Taxpayer dollars going in the direction of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood then able to turn around, take some of that money, and fight pro-life candidates. I mean, think about it. I mean, how wrong is that? It's just, again, I struggle with the lack of civility, the lack of respect. I struggle with the lack of respect for life, especially in its most innocent of stages. I struggle with those things. I don't get it. I'm not going to get it. You're not going to make me understand those things. So our founding fathers, of course, had a different viewpoint. Oh, yes, they did. They looked at things quite differently than we look at them today. And you know what I tell people when I say that, and they're like, well, this country was not founded on Christianity and all this and all that. And I say, well, go back to the record or go back to some of the things they said. And we do that on this program, and we will continue to do that as well. So anyway, just again pointing to the Joe Manchin, Patrick Morrisey debate. I thought that Joe Manchin came out of there looking much, much better than Patrick Morrisey. I don't think Patrick Morrisey has a chance, and I could be wrong, but I don't think he has a chance. And this is just me being 100% honest. Now, if you ask me, would I rather have, Joe Manchin, who opposes President Trump, or Patrick Morrisey, who supports President Trump's policies? Obviously, I'm going to support the candidate who supports the president. Because I believe in the conservative justices on the Supreme Court. And again, President Trump is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but he is appointing conservative justices to the Supreme Court, which I think is really, really important. It's vital. It's vital. So that's where I'm going to be. And I did think that there were some good points that were brought up by Patrick Morrisey. I just didn't think that they were authentic. Everything was like a script. When he brought up that, Joe Manchin supported Hillary Clinton, and had Hillary Clinton won, we would never have Justice Gorsuch or Justice Kavanaugh. And he's right. Think about the presidential election and the landscape of the presidential election. Or let me say it this way. Think about the landscape of our country today had Hillary Clinton won, especially when you take a look at the Supreme Court. Had Hillary Clinton won, the Supreme Court would have a completely, totally different makeup at this point. And it would definitely lean liberal. And that's why I said coming into the program, we have to decide where we're going to go. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when you look out there today, here's what you see. You see a lack of civility. You see cutthroat politics. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it before. And I've actually went back and done some research and looked at some of the older videos of like campaign disputes and things like that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's really bad. And I always reference things like the young man, I think he was 15 years old. He's wearing a red Make America Great Again hat. And a guy comes from across the restaurant and dumps a milkshake on his head. I saw some of the videos where just about that hat. You wear that hat and your life's in danger. I mean, I don't think that's being overdramatic. I think that's true. If you wear a Make America Great Again hat, I think your life's in danger because of the hatred for our president. And we can have the debate. Does he contribute to that by some of the things he says? I think it's a fair debate. But let me back up. Because when I say does he contribute, I'm saying does he contribute to some of the friction that's in our country? There's nothing he has said or done that justifies what some Americans are doing or how they're acting. I felt I needed to rewind there so I would not be taken out of context. Speaking of this, I come across this video of a female Presbyterian minister who lives in Pittsburgh. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, tragedy in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, where a madman killed 11 people, wounded 4 officers. And this is not the first time that at a house of worship violence has broke out. This is not the first time. It's actually becoming very concerning. You know, as a pastor, I have already taken more steps. I had taken them before, but I've taken even more steps now to protect the congregation. And I think pastors are being forced into that all across the country. But anyway, this Presbyterian minister standing on the street where the President Trump will be coming through, and she has like these signs up around her house. I don't know if you saw this. She has these signs up, and she's talking about, hate is not welcome. And then she's shouting to everyone, everyone's welcome on my street. And then she turns it into, you are not welcome here, to the president. And her argument was, I think, because she was just shouting, I think her argument was that at the end of the day, the president was a distraction from the grieving families. And I know there are people who think about that, but I don't know if someone has taken the time to set them down and say, if what you're saying is true. Now think about this. If the president is actually a distraction and is preventing the families from grieving because he's coming in to town, do they feel they play a part in that distraction? Again, I don't know. Did anyone set them down and ask them this question? Did anyone set them down and say, listen, I don't know if you know it or not, but the fact that you're out here with your signs and you're protesting and you're shouting is contributing to what you're accusing the president of. It's contributing to it. I actually think the president had every right to go there. And some say, well, he was never invited, which is not true. I heard the interview with the rabbi from the Tree of Life Synagogue who said that he was more than welcome to come. And so really the distraction, they say that it was President Trump coming that caused all the trouble, but it was the people who stood in the street shouting him down. They were the distraction. But they're never going to see it that way. They're never going to see it that way because everything is his fault. And I can remember when George W. Bush was president, I think there was a hurricane somewhere in Florida or whatever, and they blamed it on President Bush, that he caused the hurricane. Like, no, I mean, you can debate whether or not his response through FEMA was you can debate that, whether his response was good. But can you really blame a president or any person, man, woman, boy, or girl? Can you blame anyone for a storm? Oh, anyway, so tragedy. And our thoughts and prayers are with them. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a hypocrite about this. If this happened during President Obama's time, I would have said the president had every right to be there because the president does bring, he's the leader of the free world. And I think he has every right. But anyway, we'll move past that and just say that our prayers and our thoughts are with them. One tragedy in my mind that came from that was there was a 97-year-old Holocaust survivor. And, if you know the horrors of the Holocaust, to survive those horrors and then to be gunned down in America, there is a serious problem. And the problem is this: we have lost morals, we have lost values, we have lost virtue. We no longer have those things. Thus, we're struggling with freedom. Yeah, because you can't have it. You can't have it without virtue. Our founding fathers said all of that. We've been there and we've done that. Anyway, I believe that pastors are now being forced to revisit or to visit church security plans. And so I was doing some research for my own benefit, and I thought, well, maybe this is something that I can share with the listening audience because, again, the times are, well, they're evil. They're evil. And, pastors are trying to find ways to keep their congregations safe. So after a shooting on November the 5th of 2015, is that right? No, 2017, I'm sorry. This shooting, 26 people were killed. And it's actually the largest or the most deadliest attack on a house of worship in the history of the United States. It happened in Sutherland Springs, Texas, First Baptist Church. 26 people killed, November 5th, 2017. And, you can say, well, no matter what side of the gun control issue you're on, if you're a member of a church, if you attend a house of worship, this news, it just slams right in your face because you say, well, if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And I know, again, as a pastor, I have those thoughts. And so churchgoers, they start saying, well, is it actually safe to attend church? Is it safe to go to service? And so churches are forced to create security plans. And ones, unfortunately, that address active shooters. And I believe that you do that by listening to people who know and learning from them. And then also to find out the lay of the land. And so churchlawandtax.com, again, after that shooting in 2017 at the First Baptist Church there in Texas, they came out with really 5 key elements to consider for a church security plan. And, I'm saying this today, and I know that we air this locally on FM radio at a lot of times when people are in church. But if you're listening by podcast, if you're listening, after the fact, I encourage you, share this with your pastor, share this with your church leaders. If you're a pastor and you're listening, begin this discussion if you have not. Because, again, the days are evil, and we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That's what the Bible says. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So this is something we really need to begin to talk about and think about. Anyway, churchlawandtax.com said, there are 5 ways, key elements to make sure that you have as a part of your security plan. And they said number 1 is to consider having armed security at your church. Now, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm a pastor, and I don't like to think about that. I don't like to think that we would need to have armed security on campus. And it may seem like a peaceful approach to not allow armed security, but actually the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI report that in over 95% of active shooter incidents, an active shooter will not stop shooting until someone with a gun, someone who is armed, shows up. And so the question then becomes, in the circumstance, what would your church do? And so one recommendation is to have a uniformed off-duty police officer in your church, maybe at security or wherever. Our church, we have like an information booth as you come in, and we station someone there. And a more recent change we made, again, after the Tree of Life shooting, is that there's a certain time where we lock the doors. Now, people still can come and go as they please, but it gives us more control over the situation. And let's all be honest, in an active shooter type situation, really what you're trying to buy is time. You're trying to slow down that shooter and prevent them from causing harm. The second thing is to build a proper security team. Now, our church did this, or at least started this process several years ago. It's important, though, to have the right people on your security team. People who have maybe some training in law enforcement, or maybe they have a military background. And never forget, again, because the days are evil and that there's a lot happening out there, you need to conduct proper background checks and make sure that the people who are involved are trained for your specific church security plan, because churches have different needs. Number 3, they say to develop a church communication plan for a crisis. Now, how much does your church congregation need to know about security? They don't need to know everything. But after national news like the Tree of Life synagogue shooting and the other church shootings that we've heard of, it's important to let your church members know that you have a plan to keep them safe. And that's one thing that I try to do. And I tell people it's very difficult to balance that because you don't want people afraid, but at the same time you do want them to feel safe. So it's equally important for them to know what they should do in case of an emergency on your church campus. Now you start talking about possibly having active shooter drills, and at the least have a discussion with the people in your church that says, listen, God forbid that this ever happened, but if it does, this is what we do. I can tell you that the layout of our church has some logistical, what's the word I'm looking for? Challenges. That's it. Some logistical challenges. So we're talking about installing lights or some sort of a screen that would let people in the sanctuary know, the right people in the sanctuary know that there's an issue outside of the sanctuary. Listen, this is going to cost money. This is going to cost time. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to make sure is that we don't see a cost in lives. We want our people at our church to feel safe. And this is a public service. I'm just passing this along. If you're in West Virginia or if you're in California or wherever you may be, part of being a pastor is being a shepherd and providing a certain level of, we would agree, spiritual protection. But we have a responsibility as well to the people that attend our church. And I personally am going to do everything that I can to ensure their safety. And I hope that as you listen to these recommendations, and there are others, and if you have a recommendation, I would love to hear from you. Maybe it's a conversation we could have right here on this program. If you're a pastor, if you're, a police officer or military or whatever, and you have something that would help us better understand how to protect our people, I would love to hear from you. Contact me. Find me on Facebook. Contact me by email. What's Important Now Radio at gmail.com. Whatever it takes, get in touch with me and let me know because, again, your voice is important. And if you have information that could help keep people safe, I definitely want to hear it and want to share it. I'm running out of time. I've got to move quickly here. Also, plan for different types of critical events. You should have a plan for an active shooter on your church campus and another plan for an active shooter who is nearby. And for our church, we had that happen not that long ago. There was a situation in a neighboring community where there was a situation that, our church went on lockdown and we had a plan. And then finally, don't overlook domestic violence because the most common type of active shooter scenarios on church property typically involve a spillover from domestic violence. And what I would say is know your people. Know your people and know if they're going through a difficult time and what you can do to support them before it ever ends up in a situation where it becomes unsafe for you or for the people around you. Quickly, because I have like a minute. As a child, we were at church and a man came yielding a gun because of his wife. And I was a small child, 5, 6, 7 years old, and I remember that. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a new thing. These things are happening. I'm out of time. Thank you so much for being a part of our program. Find us on Facebook. We're also on Twitter, Sears Win Radio. We are on Spreaker, Spreaker.com, all of our programs. And don't forget, we do have a program called Pastor Talk. I think it's an hour program. We think you'll enjoy it. And, of course, What's Important Now can also be found on iTunes, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Spotify. The list goes on and on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, fight the good fight of faith. Contend for the faith. There is a cause. It does matter. And it is important now. Thank you so much for being a part of our program. Email address, what'simportantnowradio@gmail.com. Our mailing address is 8901 Good Hope Pike, Lost Creek, West Virginia, 26385. Again, thank you for listening to our program. Don't forget, fight that good fight of faith. Stand and believe because you serve a God who can. I'm Tom Sears. Thanks. This has been What's Important Now.